I think the line between desire and like desperation is so thin. I never lacked the desire, but as soon as that became desperation, it was just a recipe for something to go wrong.
All bowled in. Bracey goes for a duck on his debut.
And he's gone. Faced 6 balls at Lord's. This time, just a single delivery.
How did you get out of that slump and that sort of negative mindset?
Yeah, it was all about just rediscovering the perspective that I had growing up. Spoke to a therapist, spoke to a psychologist, all of that stuff around frustration, just it is not the end of the world.
Lamb in past Ian Blackwell, pushes it wide. Oh, and that evades. Cover point. Bracey, 200. What an innings.
Singdale, the last ball of the match, 1 to win, 9 wickets down. McIlroy swings. Unbelievable. He's been caught. Bracey has taken the catch. It's a tie off the last ball of the game.
G'day legends and welcome back to the Cricket Mentoring Podcast. I'm very excited to be back in the studio. We've got another fantastic guest today, a test cricketer, an international cricketer, James Bracey. Brace, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Scolls. Thanks for having me. This is different. I'm used to podcasts on Zoom and podcasts on all others, so this is pretty cool.
Well, this is the real thing. I've been wanting to get you on for ages. Obviously, you were here last summer. We did a lot of work together and you went back home. You did really well, but I did want to wait to do a physical podcast rather than through the computer. So hopefully this is all right today.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
So you're back in Perth. How's your time been back here so far?
Yeah, good. Just been settling in. I've got really nice place with Corey Rockachurley. So cricket link there, lots of cricket chatted. So until my partner gets here, it's pretty cricket heavy. But it's been really nice, settled in nicely, and I'm good to be back with the uni boys as well.
Well, Rock is a former guest on the podcast. We were just saying it was a long episode, that one, but an action-packed, full of value episode with Rock. He doesn't mind chatting, which was awesome for us. Now, as always, I want to go back to the start and learn more about your whole journey. So tell us about your first cricketing memory.
Yeah, so just happened, not by chance. My family aren't a big cricket family. Neither of my parents or my grandparents or anything like that ever played. So just happened that we lived on the back of the cricket field, which, you know, in my younger childhood, it was more go out there and play football and have a kick around. And when we got to sort of the age where the local cricket club started to have youth teams and stuff, we went out there, me and my brother. He's older, so I sort of just followed everything he did. And always, you know, when he got out there at 7 and I was 4, I wanted to get out there and play with the older kids. So that's how it started, and it was just an obsession from there, really. That then became garden cricket, and they luckily sort of put some nets in right out the back of our house, so we were lucky to be able to use those. And yeah, just spiraled from there, really.
Amazing. I've got almost my daughter's 6 on Thursday, and I was actually thinking this morning, I really would love her to have a little bit older role model. She's like my youngest daughter, Poppy, who's 3. She has her older sister, but Scarlett doesn't quite at the moment. She's got a few older kids around, but having that older role model who you just want to be like and copy is so valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of just did everything he did. And I think luckily he was always probably the more confident one. So I think when he got to an age where, you know, he was at school and that sort of thing, he always wanted to join in and always wanted to do that. Whereas I was a little bit more reserved and sort of, I was really lucky that I had him, that, you know, I was more confident and comfortable around, just to follow around and get involved, really.
Awesome. So then how did it progress? The nets were put in out the back. When did you start to really love your cricket and play competitively?
Yeah, so as I said, I played a lot of football until I was probably 11, 12.
So are you still good in the football warm-ups?
Well, football warm-ups have gone down the drain, so haven't probably played for a couple of years. But I'd always be okay. I'm certainly not that good. Hence why I sort of got released at sort of 11, 12, which was quite brutal, really. But I think when that happened at 11, maybe, and when pathway cricket started to kick in with Gloucestershire, that was sort of when it took over and became my sort of main focus.
What were you released? You had a big contract?
Yeah, I was with Bristol Rovers Academy. So like professional academies in England start at 7.
Yeah, wow.
Well, probably even younger now. I started at 9. Did a couple of years, and it basically just replaces your recreational football, and they call it, academy football. But yeah, there was a whole signing, releasing sort of system. So at 11, I just got the see you later, mate. That'll do you. So
well, there you go. Lucky for cricket,
I know.
I guess.
Yeah.
And so how did the teenage years look through for your cricket?
Yeah, so just continued to play as much cricket as I could, really. I was playing, under 13s, 15s, 17s. I probably started playing adult cricket at 12, so was playing that on a Saturday. It's good, the youth cricket at home is obviously with the light, is played on evenings, so you've always got your weekends free for your adult cricket, which was, I think, a huge thing for me growing up. And I was lucky that the year I started playing adult cricket, my dad decided to take up cricket because both of his kids loved it so much. So I managed to play with him through there as well, and just went through the ranks. Played Gloucestershire 11 to 17.
So as soon as you started, you were good. Like you were in the Gloucestershire 11s.
Yeah, I was always probably best in my club team. Always loved it the most. Always probably worked the hardest as well. So that all sort of tied in nicely. But I was always in those teams, but probably not the top percentile that was probably going to get looked at for pathways and academies and this sort of stuff right away. So I played a lot of cricket, and I think that was the key to learning a lot of the stuff that turned me sort of when I got to 17, 18 into the player I was able to be. And
through those teenage years, were you always still striving to catch up to your brother or be like your brother?
Yeah, definitely, because he was sort of a little bit of a late developer as well. He always played, never really got noticed until he was 16, 17. He didn't start playing any representative cricket till he was 17. So, but he always had that sort of hunger, that desire to make it. And when he made the academy and started playing second 11 at Gloucester, that every step he took, that was the step I wanted to take as well. And I think that's what sort of drove me to then, knuckle down and be like, this is what I want to do long term. What other things can I be doing apart from just batting all the time in the nets and wicket keeping all the time to actually, make that step?
It's fascinating. I saw a study once that the second child is always the most, well, not always, is often the most successful because they're often just chasing the older sibling. Yeah. If the older sibling gets good, then they're trying to be better. And it sounds a bit similar in your story. How did you get into wicket keeping? Where did that start?
Sam did it. That was literally it. He did it. He was very good at it. I think that was always his first skill. And he'll always say, in the end, when it got to 19 and he was let go, it was probably his batting that caused that decision. It was his wicket keeping was never an issue. So I just always wanted to do that. He was always stood up to all the seam bowlers, and he was always trying all these funky things and wanting to be the best at that. And I was like, I want to be better than him. It wasn't a case that I looked up to him and saw how good he was, and I wanted to do the same. I always bowled a little bit, but I didn't really enjoy bowling. I wasn't very good at bowling, and I think I was driven by the fact that when I put some gloves on, I was pretty good at it, and I was really interested in doing it. So that's what sort of started that. But that didn't really take off until 15, 16. I never kept in club cricket, really. I never kept in rep cricket, really. But I always just did a bit of it. And then when I got to 15, I thought, I looked at where I was in sort of the pathway and that sort of thing, and I thought that was my way in as well. The batting would sort of take care of itself. I'd been doing a lot of that. So, yeah, and I think it just, with keeping, you've got to love it. Otherwise, it's the same for any skill, but I think keeping is one that people often put on the back burner. And you can just dip in and out. But I think if you're going to be a really, really good wicketkeeper, it's something you've got to knuckle down with and appreciate that it can be a bit lonely at times, and you just got to go with that.
And you're always in the game, exactly. Your mind needs to, if you don't enjoy it, there's no point doing it.
Yeah.
Going back to you when you're 4 and you're going out to the back garden and you start playing, I assume there was lots of throwing and catching with your brother, because I was out in the front driveway this morning with my daughter with a bouncy ball and bouncing it up, and she's trying to catch it. And she's getting pretty good because we're practicing. And I don't believe that people are just born good at something. Yes, you might pick things up quicker, or you might have quite good hand-eye coordination, but I think everything is learned. And so I can imagine you spent a lot of time in your very young years just throwing and catching and moving and diving and having a bit of fun with the ball, so that when you're 11, when you're 14, when you're 15, it does come more naturally to you.
100%. I think, he had a group of friends from school that were all really keen on cricket as well. I didn't really have that, so as I said, I just joined in with them, and there was a lot of you'd come up with quirky little games in the garden or out on the curb in the street where you're like bouncing the ball off the curb and reacting, or as I said, the nets were out the back, but they always had this like wooden like frame, like catch it ramp thing.
Cradle,
yeah. So it was half off and like the bits were snapping off every time, but like you just get 3 or 4 of you at each end and just throw the ball onto that, and you're just reacting, or when it's wet, getting like an incredible or something and just like hurling it at people and just diving around, having fun. I think that was a huge part of it, and where I thought, you saw the brilliance in taking good catches. I think that's what sort of attracts me a little bit to keeping, is those like crazy moments that you can create by doing that.
Yeah, nice. And then at what stage did you start to think about, like, I'm pretty good at this, I'm in the pathway, like I could make a career? When did that sort of become a dream or a vision for you?
I think when I played my first second 11 game, I was about probably 16. Wasn't a very good keeper, but it just happened that all the keepers were either injured or playing first 11, obviously. And it just happened that this one week was they were struggling for a keeper. I batted 12, didn't bat, but just kept wicket, which was strange because it was obviously my second skill at the time. But I think that moment where I was walking out there on a field with a lot of guys with names on their backs, who were all discussing, how are we going to get in the first team? Professional coaches there. I think that was the moment where I thought, there's a lot of people ahead of me at the moment, but I think getting opportunities like this is so key to making that step. And I was just keen to learn as much as I could, and that was how I was going to get in. So
those teenage years, do we have a lot of young listeners with parents often? What did your training look like? What did your weeks look like? Obviously, the great thing you mentioned about the UK is you can play junior games in the evenings, 6 till 9 p.m. or something, and you play some adult cricket on the weekend. So what did sort of a standard week look like for you as a 13 or 15 or 16-year-old?
Yeah, it's obviously different for everyone. I can't comment too much on bowlers. Obviously, bowlers these days, young bowlers, especially if they're spotted early, are obviously wrapped up a little bit. I just played as much as I possibly could. If anyone ever said there's a space free, I'd hang around on a Saturday morning at the club waiting for a third teamer to drop out just so I could go and play. So yeah, every night of the week I'm either playing a game or I'm up at the club, and it's just, as I said, just throwing catches or getting involved with the older team who are training or something like that. Just being really keen, really curious to try and get involved. Obviously throughout the winter it's slightly different. Had a lot of indoor nets and that sort of thing, but I didn't play school cricket or anything like that. So it was probably only 2 or 3 nights a week, but I always played football as well, and that was a good way of keeping that competitive spirit in. Obviously here it's Aussie rules football or rugby or anything like that, but I'd be I'm a real advocate for trying to play those other sports as long as possible. Not only is it a really good social thing outside of the cricket season, which is obviously only half the year, but you develop a lot of skills, a lot of physical attributes especially, that might not seem transferable to cricket but go a long way, I think, especially for young guys, where lifting weights probably isn't the best thing, but actually moving around, becoming more agile, strong, getting used to contact, that sort of thing, I think can be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that stands out, it seems, is your love for the game. And you said, I was just there every night. I was getting there, and I went on a Saturday morning trying to see if a third teamer put out. And that to me is a trait that like Rock had, and the best players, whether it's the very, very best or the next level players, seem to all share is this: I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I love it and I want to be around. And that's sort of the case with you, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the toughest point is when you get to 16, 17, 18 and all your mates are off doing other things, and you got to miss out on the lads' holiday before you go to uni, or you've got to miss out on going out on the Friday because you got a game on the Saturday. You've got to, the amount of things I've missed with my school friends is like, I can't even remember how many. So that's probably when it becomes the most challenging, when other people have different interests and different goals in life, and you've got to be really clear and really passionate about yours to say, no, this is what I want to do, And you know that you work out for yourself. I was lucky. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. It was so obvious from 14, 15. But yeah, I think you've got to have, because if you're going to spend 8 hours on a Saturday, 8 hours on a Sunday playing a game of cricket where you might be involved for 2 balls of it, you got to love it, and you've got to really understand that that's how it's going to be sometimes. But when you do have that day where you have a day out, it's well worth it. So yeah, that's why I think the best players who do get in have that trait 90% of the time, because it takes a lot of graft and a lot of what feels like wasted time at the time to get there.
To keep showing up. You've got to love it to keep showing up. And I say to young athletes that the best, most successful people in anything have usually had the most failure, and they just keep showing up, and then they get out the other side of that. What I see so often, and it happened with me, is you're young, you love it, and then you start getting decent, you start getting selected, and you start dreaming of what could be, and it becomes less about the enjoyment and less about love and more about performance and selections and results. Did you go through that? And at what stage, or are you out the back of that, where you're almost like, you know what, if I enjoy it, the results will look after themselves? I think when you watch the best players, they're usually having fun. They're usually back to that kid-like state where they're just really enjoying their art or their craft. And then they know that if I'm working hard and I'm enjoying the journey and the process, the results will come. How did your sort of teenage years, early professional career go through that period?
Yeah, I think mine was slightly sort of unique in the fact that I always thoroughly enjoyed it. I've always put pressure on myself, but I think because I had such like a quick rise through each of those steps, I always felt like when I went up a level, I wasn't quite ready, but I always seemed to hit the ground running.
So you'd feel like you weren't ready, but you'd actually do quite well.
I went into that situation, my first twos game, my first class game, my first list A game, all these where I'm like, it's probably more doubts more than anything. You probably are ready, but I felt like, oh, look at this, like I'm here, I'm playing with him against him, and it almost feels like you're a little bit out of your depth. But I think looking back on it, I probably wasn't. It was just because it was the first time, you don't know what it's like. So I did well when I went into the twos, first class career, got off to a really quick start. And then I was probably called up for national honours like a little bit sooner, was a bit sooner than I thought, just because the way they were selecting the teams was slightly changing. But, you know, I went into my first Lions tours and Lions games and did really well, and went on into my first England squads and impressed in squad games and this sort of stuff. So even though I was putting pressure on myself, I felt like those steps were quite clean. There was not too many setbacks within that. But then when it did sort of didn't go well, which happened to just be when I made my test debut, like those couple of games didn't go well. I think that's when it sort of, the enjoyment started to disappear, and my whole focus was becoming on, well, when am I going to get back in? How am I going to get back in? You know, playing first class cricket almost felt a little bit like it wasn't enough, because I'd had that other success that
tasted the next level.
Whereas I feel like I can honestly say in the last probably just 3 months, 2-3 months at the back end of this summer, which has gone really well, that I can say I've really enjoyed it, even when I've not had the numbers with the bat. I might have dropped the odd catch, but I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed every game, whatever it's brought. And I've just really enjoyed being around people that I really care about. And, you know, I feel like I'm putting a lot of effort into improving my game rather than focusing on where it's going to take me. So definitely had that sort of up, down. I'm sure I'll have it again where that enjoyment reduces a little bit, but I definitely think I won't have the spikes and troughs that I had probably in those 3 or 4 years.
And that comes with maturity and experience and perspective, and it's hard for a teenager to have that. I want to get into your test career, obviously, but let's go back to your sort of, you played in the twos at 16. Give us a bit more of an insight on how you progressed to your first class debut and getting a full-time contract.
Yeah, it felt so like looking back at it, it was so ruthless because, as I said, I sort of came in to take the gloves. You're playing 12 and I just didn't bat. You know, you've got the contracted seamers who couldn't really hold a bat, but, you know, it was a case of pecking order. I think the next season would have been 2015. I'd have been, 17 years old probably. And you had 3 academy batters who could play every week. And because we only had a small squad, and you'd bat 7, 8 and 9. And it would be a case of, it started just the oldest batted at 7, 8, 9, and it was every innings, whoever scored the most would get to bat 7. The next game, whoever scored the most would get to bat 7, 8, 9, and you'd just shuffle around depending on how. And it just became this, like, between ourselves, just, right, I'm not gonna allow them to bat. I want to bat 7, because if you're batting at 7, you feel like you can make a real impact on the game. Whereas if you're batting 9, you might get 10 not out, you might get 15 not out, but it just never felt the same. And obviously you're competing with these guys who, they happen to both be a little bit older than me, but like, you wanted the contract, obviously. So yeah, that was my first sort of year of twos cricket, which was nice actually, because I was used to going back to age group cricket, you know, not dominating, but scoring quite a few runs. And then you turn up at these games, it's a different kettle of fish. You're stuck at short leg. You got to run all the drinks when you're not batting, and then you get your opportunity at 9, and you're like, right, I've got to try and do something here.
So you weren't keeping all that time? You were keeping?
No, so in the end I wasn't keeping because there was 2 professional keepers. So yeah, that's sort of how it was for the next year or so. And then it got to a stage where, you know, you'd have a few injuries later in the season. One of you, again, who's got the most runs, who's, you know, had the most impact, gets to go and open the batting for a game or something like that. And that's how it sort of started. I got a couple of opportunities at 3, probably the next season. Got a couple of hundreds, and it just happened the final game of the year, there was an injury, and I got chucked out there. So it was sort of...
In the first team, you mean?
Yeah, it felt like I deserved it. It felt like, you know, it was a case of, as I said, when I got these opportunities, I don't want to say lucky, but I was fortunate that I was able to take them.
Well, I think that's what life is about, especially sport, is you've got to take opportunities. You've got to be in the right place at the right time and ready. You don't want the opportunity to come when you're not ready or when things aren't quite right, because you might not get another opportunity.
Yeah, and it felt like, again, I walked out in that game, and I think I was quite unfortunate that it was a wet week. It was the end of September. We were playing against a team that was gunning for promotion. We weren't. Felt like a lot of my teammates had probably switched off a little bit. And they came at us with Archer, Chris Jordan, a guy called Steve McGoffin, who was just
He's an old teammate of
mine.
mine.
Was just known for
brilliant bowler,
being just relentless. And I just
especially
never
the lefties. He used to love.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd never seen anything like that. And I probably wasn't ready, and I didn't do very well. But I remember walking off, and the coach at the time, Richard Dawson, was like, right, that's where you got to be. That's where we know you can be. Just have a think about when you come back this time next year, how are you going to be better at combating that? And that was a really nice experience looking back on it, because it almost felt like I had nothing to lose. They wanted to see how I got on. I was happy with how it went. You know, I maybe soaked up 60 or 70 balls, but only got 15 or 20. And it felt like I had a platform then to go, right, I need to get better at this. I'm going to do that by using this person to help me do this. And it felt like I had a better understanding of my game from that point, which was great.
Well, it probably doesn't get much tougher in county cricket than Archer, Jordan, McGoffin. at Hove?
At Bristol, which was probably even worse, really, because it was just a bit of a pudding. And I'd probably not face bowling like that anyway, but on a pretty average wicket, it made it pretty tricky.
And then when did you get your professional contract?
So that was the end of 2016. I didn't get my first contract until the start of 2018. So I then played 5 first-class games in 2017.
At the end of 2016, were you disappointed that you weren't contracted for 2017, or did you?
I didn't really think about it. It wasn't. I was going to university. I didn't even think about it. I was happy that they wanted to keep me on scholarship for another year. No, not really. And then I played 5 games the end of the next year, scored 100, 350s. I think I averaged about 60.
In 2017.
Yeah.
Your
And
second
still didn't get
season.
signed.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'm going to at some point because I've done really well, but it just felt like, I don't know, I think finances and whatnot. And I was off to uni again, so probably just got put on the back burner. And then prior to the start of 2018, I signed my first deal. So yeah, it just felt like all those steps. As I said, I was fortunate to take those opportunities, and I just sort of bedded into playing first class cricket, which was amazing.
And so when you played your first game or signed your first contract, was there a sense of, I've made it? Or was there always a bigger picture? Because I look back at my journey and I grew up in the middle of Australia, tried to play, my goal was to play for Australia, went to the UK because I had a British passport. And my next goal was like to play professional cricket or get signed. And I achieved that. It was almost like, here's a 3-year contract, but it was almost like I'd achieved my goal at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I relaxed a bit and I was just like, this is cool. I'm a professional cricketer. But I never dreamt of playing for England. So there was nothing beyond that. But so for you in that period, were you just enjoying cricket still, or were you looking ahead and saying, what's next?
Yeah, I was loving it. As I said, I really enjoyed that period because then I was going off to uni and there was an amazing cricket program at Loughborough. So I was able to live the life of a 19, 20-year-old and play cricket and study and come out at the end of it with something worthwhile. I think the thing that stopped me from thinking I've made it by playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games was, you see experienced players who are probably in their late 20s, early 30s, then coming to the end of their contracts, not being re-signed and thinking, these are guys that I've looked up to for the last 4 or 5 years. And, they're putting in the odd performance and they're doing okay, but they're not doing enough to get re-signed. And it's almost like it's quite a fickle, brutal world. Like, you got to keep performing. It's not about having 1 knock, 2 knocks, but doing it for a full season. So that was my aim going into 2018, was I want to play every game of the 4-day season. I didn't have too much focus on white ball cricket at that point. That needed some work, but I was like, I want to make the number 3 spot my spot. Like, I don't want to be the guy that doesn't start and then comes in when someone else gets injured. I want to be the guy that nails that spot down. And that's what I was able to do, which was obviously what I set out to do.
And did you have the gloves at the start?
No, so I didn't keep in first class cricket till the end of 2018.
And how did you manage that? Were you disappointed, or were you just happy to be in the team as a batter?
I was just happy to be in the team. Gareth Roderick, who was the keeper at the time, was a stronger keeper than me. He's more experienced. He was, and he still is. Obviously, he plays at Worcester now, but a very good wicket-keeper. So that didn't worry me. But I still went back and played all my club cricket as a keeper, all my uni cricket as a keeper. So I didn't allow myself to forget about it. But I knew that at that stage, the batting had to take priority because, that was what I was being picked at the top level to do. So I think I'm lucky that if I'm doing something, I'm doing it full throttle. Still the same now. Sometimes it becomes your downfall, but I don't think that'll be something that ever changes. So I'm lucky that in that period I made sure that I continued to work on my keeping, even though, because I knew that at some point it was going to help me get in a team, or Rodders was either going to get injured. He had really dodgy fingers, so it was always in the back of my mind that I would need it at some point.
Yeah, nice. And now let's go into your test cricket. So obviously 2 tests, and that'll never be taken away from you, even though you didn't go as well as you would have hoped. But tell us about the period leading up to that. What did you have to do in county cricket and Lions and whatever to get selected? And then maybe a bit about the disappointment and struggle post-test matches.
Yeah. I was picked initially probably more on potential. I had 2018 where I probably, averaged late 30s in Div 2, did all right. But as a first season, it was pretty good. But, not what you'd expect to be picked for something like that. Start of 2019 started really well. And then there was a one-off Lions game mid-season, so I got picked for that. That was at Kent against Australia. Again, did pretty well. couple of 30s or a 40 and a 30 against a good attack. And then there happened to be some Lions tours coming up. So I was lucky. I had a tour to India, tour to Oz. And again, did pretty well and found myself there as a keeper. So I think they liked the fact that I was a top order batter who could keep batting at 6, who has the skills to knuckle down. I think the England philosophy back then under Bayliss and then Silverwood couldn't be more different to what it is now. It was more about, batting time, trying to bat once, and, soaking up pressure rather than unloading that pressure back on the other team. So, which worked initially, but probably not in the long run. So I probably suited that. I was soaked up a lot of balls. I batted a long time. I had a decent technique. And when they realised I could keep pretty well, I found myself in the line side as a keeper. So that's what I meant when I said it's going to come back and help me out in the long run. We had a lot of good batters at that time. So it was Jennings, Sibley, Crawley, Burns, North East, Dan Lawrence. So getting in the top 4 was going to be tricky. Sam Hain. So actually having the gloves was the best thing that could have ever happened. So yeah, played in some great Lions games, one at the MCG. Had a great tour in 2020 before COVID hit. And then I was just helped by the fact that big squads were needed, big travelling squads were needed. So I was able to get in the test setup from the summer of 2020.
Cool. And then how you played your games in middle of 2021? How did it progress from getting in the squads in 2020 through to 2021 when you actually played?
Yeah, so it was 2 series at home and then straight to Sri Lanka and then India for sort of 12, 14 weeks. And I think such a strange one because that whole being cooped up, just literally go to the ground, train early, be at the game, 12th man, then do your gym work over the breaks, train again after the game because sort of these are the slots that there's 20 blokes there, 11 playing. So you've then got 9 blokes who are all gunning to get in the team,
better,
but also trying to get better. I think for me, it was my first proper tour. You had a couple of young spinners, Parkinson, Crane, Amar Verdi, who were all keen as mustard to get involved, but you're almost put on the back burner a little bit, and rightly so, because it's hard to manage 20 blokes around a test match. So I think that almost, it created a little bit of a fragility in my mind, as in I was working so hard, I wanted to go there, impress, but if you every day for 12, 14 weeks in an environment where realistically I was never going to play, there was a lot of other batters there who were ahead of me, justified. And for me, it was a big training camp, but that is a long training camp. And I think by the end, a little bit of burnout. Probably I didn't have the understanding of a little bit less is more at times. And I came back fitter, stronger, probably a better batter and a much better keeper than I was. So all those areas were amazing going into that season, but I felt knackered, and I felt like if things did go wrong, I was going to sort of crack at some point. And amazingly, I went back and started that summer really well for Gloss. We won a lot of games. We beat some good sides. I got runs. I was keeping well. I was opening the batting and keeping. And I think once I got to playing those games, I was picked on merit because I was scoring runs, I was keeping well. But I think there's a little something in me that I knew that if things didn't go right, whether that was for Gloucester or England, I was going to crack a little bit because I was just fatigued, I was tired, and therefore a little bit vulnerable. But at the time, you're just riding the wave, you just chuck yourself in. And yeah, obviously it culminated in something that at the time was the end of the world, but as I said, probably looking back now, I take a lot of great learning from it because I know that about myself for a starter, and I'm able to look at it a bit more honestly now, rather than just being a rubbish experience. It's probably meant that I'm way better now than I was then. So if I was to get the opportunity again, I know that I'd do it a hell of a lot differently.
Well, everyone's growth, most growth comes from our biggest setbacks or failures. So learning about yourself and doing a bit of reflection and soul searching is where we grow. If you had your time again, knowing what you know now, you said less is more.
Yeah.
What would you do differently? Yeah. How would you try and stay fresher throughout that period?
And when I say less is more, I'm still going to do a lot. Like that's in my nature. I'm always going to tick every box. But just knowing that one of those boxes is also your health and resting.
And getting away from the game.
That's like as much of a box as, well, like you say about the 6 pillars, like lifestyle and your emotional health is just as important as the technical, tactical stuff that you do in training as well. And I probably didn't give that enough love, essentially.
And it's hard for someone like you who is all in. It's hard because, and in an environment where hard work is put on a pedestal, and you look at, like, you hear about Root, Smith, Marnus, who train their house down. I saw a quote from Travis Head the other day say, I'm not built like them.
Yeah.
I need time away so that I can come in fresh and hungry and go well. So for someone like you who is of the Marnus and Smith ilk, it's hard to step back and say, you know what, I'm feeling fatigued, I'm going to take a day off. Because you almost feel guilty having a day off, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm certainly getting better. But yeah, it's definitely hard, especially when, you know, in our squad at Gloss, we've got a lot of young players who are hungry and work hard, hit a lot of balls, bowl a lot of balls, cover a lot of yards on the track. Like, they're of the similar mindset to me, so I obviously want to match them and work hard together. But I mean, my best friend is Miles Hammond. He's of the Travis Head ilk, and having Bo Webster over at Gloss this year, he's in that sort of mould as well. Like, not that they don't know what they need, so they just don't do anything. Like, almost the opposite. They know exactly what they need, and sometimes it looks like they're doing the minimal, but they're so well prepared going into a game that they're still performing well. You know, Hamo was our best batter this year at Gloss. Bo came out, he's obviously getting closer and closer to test on us, and it just shows that it's not just a numbers game really anymore.
It's quality over quantity for these
100%.
guys.
And I'm never going to be of that extent, but actually just harnessing a little bit of that, I think, has helped me get a better balance.
So, yeah, such a good message that I think each individual needs to try and understand themselves as they grow. 12-year-olds don't know themselves, but as you get to 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, it's like, what do I need? I think Cooper Connolly's another one I've heard. I don't know Cooper that well. I know him a little bit, but that he's more of the Travis Head. He's not an overtrainer, whereas Teague needs to hit thousands of balls like Steve and Marnus to feel prepared. So understanding yourself, and it sounds like you got to a place where you were so overtrained that your hunger was low and you didn't have that real desire, which I think underpins success as well, is crucial.
Yeah, I think the line between desire and like desperation is so thin. Like, and I think I never lacked the desire, but as soon as that became desperation, it was just a
mixed
recipe.
with fatigue as well.
Yeah, it was just a recipe for something to go wrong, and it did. So I definitely have moments still where I'm just desperate to go out there and do well and contribute for my team, but it doesn't then change the way I think about my game. For example, I've come here, my first 2 knocks have been bang average. I haven't done very well, but I don't have any less confidence going into the next game that I can go out there and score a big one. And that was the exact same thing this summer back in England. One low score isn't then making me feel like the next one needs to be a big one, because then it eats you alive and it's not very enjoyable anymore. So, yeah, I'm definitely getting there.
How do you think you've got to that place? I spoke before a bit about its maturity and experience and perspective, but is that all it is, do you think, for you to have gone to a place of one low score doesn't make me a bad player? Because that's the thinking a lot of young players have, is they fail and then they're like, oh no, the next innings I have to do well, they don't have that belief and trust in themselves, I guess.
Yeah, probably a couple of things. I think I went back and looked at some of the best batters and like looked at their scores, like, and just I spoke to bangers about it this summer. Like, the life of a batter is crazy. Like, everyone looks at sort of two numbers, like the number of runs you score and like your average, and it is amazing how it works. Like 0, 0, 5, 15, 200 not out, and that's one innings in 5, but that makes it look like your average is 45, and everyone's like, "Whoa, he's getting them, isn't he?" So it's just like, it's so finite that, and that's just how it is. I think looking at that, that's given me a little bit of perspective that you ain't going to do it every game. You can't do it every game. Even if you have a real rich period, there will be another period that's the opposite. It doesn't mean your game's in any sort of worse a place technically. It doesn't mean that you can be any less happy, but that's where your mental processes come in, and being really strong there allows you to get through those periods, and those periods become shorter and less painful, essentially. So that was one. And I think at the end of 2022, I'd had an okay year. It certainly wasn't bad, but in my mind, it felt like it was a terrible season. And I got to the end of the season, I had a really bad back end of the season. And I just came off and I was like, I don't like batting anymore. And I felt like I genuinely meant it. Like, it didn't feel like a throwaway comment that I was angry that I'd got out again. And like, I genuinely felt like I wasn't enjoying going in the nets and working. I wasn't enjoying going out to bat. I wasn't thinking about the possibility of scoring a big score and helping win a game of cricket. It was going out and I was like, how am I getting out this time? And I think that was a real switch in my mind. It probably didn't then bear the fruits until another 12 months later, but I think that was a real moment where I thought, this just isn't like me at all. I've never had this feeling before. What am I going to do to try and help it? So I think those are the two things that opened my eyes a little bit.
So what did you do in that period? And that was the toughest part of your career, right? Is that post-England Test matches, those next couple of seasons. How did you get out of that slump and that sort of negative mindset?
Yeah, it was all about just rediscovering the perspective that I had growing up, probably pre-England in general. So probably going back to 2019 and before that. Spoke to a therapist, spoke to a psychologist, and it was all trying to work out, was it just cricket related? Was it just part of my personality generally that was not allowing me to deal with these things like I'd like? And I still speak to a therapist now. I think it's great because he's impartial. He's not, I think he is an ex-sportsman, but he's not a cricket fan at all. He doesn't understand cricket. And it's just nice to feel like I can talk 100% honestly, because when I'm talking to my family, I don't want them to worry about me. There's always a little bit of bias. When I'm talking to my teammates, there's always a little bit of bias because you don't want to give away too much. I feel like I'm a lot better now. I feel like we're a very close group and everyone's so emotionally aware and honest that it's great, but probably a few years ago it wasn't as much like that. So it was nice to just go in, speak my mind 100%, and I ended up saying things that I was like, oh God, like I've never even thought about that before, but it just comes out. And that feeling's like very, yeah, it was cool to have that feeling, but it's hard work. So yeah, I continued to do that because I think that allowed me to understand that cricket's just a part of what I am and who I am and what I do. It often seems like a much bigger part than it is, but actually there's a lot more to life than that. It doesn't mean I work any less hard. Doesn't mean I don't care about as much, but it just allows me to appreciate everything else as well. And I think that just slowly, not straight away, allowed me to deal with those cricket-related sort of situations a lot better. Yeah.
And to me, that's the ultimate is a love for the game. that underpins the hard work you put in, with some perspective that this isn't everything, and I'm not going to die, no one else is going to die if I nick off or play a bad shot, that sort of gives you the freedom to go out and trust yourself. And I've been speaking to a therapist, a psychologist for the last few years, and it's really interesting. Like, I'm exploring myself as a person, not because I have ever had any mental health issues or I've been depressed or anything like that. It's just me trying to learn about myself. I'm not very emotionally, like a lot of males, I'm not very good at expressing my emotions. I shut down. And so with 2 daughters now, I'm trying to learn about how I can express my emotion and that every emotion is valid and all these sort of things. And yeah, I think it's really, really powerful. And I think it's powerful to have this conversation, to break any stigma that might still be out there that it's weak to go and speak to someone. Because I don't feel weak. I feel quite strong when I go and speak to the therapist.
100%. And in the process, I've just become more competent at doing it with the people I care about as well. I don't need to go and see them every 2 weeks now. I can go every month, 2 months, because I can have those more honest conversations with my teammates, my partner, my parents, my coach, because I'm less insecure about what they'll think, because I know that I know they care about me, and I know deep down that all they want is the best for me. So it's allowed me to then not feel like I have to go to someone impartial. I can just incorporate that as part of my daily life, which is obviously so much more easy and nice that the people I care about most, I'm able to be 100% open with.
We're just taking a break from this episode for a minute to tell you about the cricket mentoring community. We're on a mission to build the world's best community of cricketers, coaches, and parents. So no matter where in the world you live or what level you're at right now, the cricket mentoring community can help you. If you're committed to your game and serious about becoming the best cricketer you can be and person you can be off the field, then join cricketers from over 24 countries around the world in the cricket mentoring community. Get access to myself and other CM mentors and experts from around the world as we aim to teach you the 6 pillars of success: technical, tactical, mental, emotional, physical, and lifestyle, so that you can become the best you can be. If this excites you and you're ready to take the next step in your journey, then click on the link in the description below and join the cricket mentoring community now.
At what point do you think you realise the importance of your sort of inner circle and having obviously your parents, your missus, your close teammates, your friends, understanding that they love you no matter what? They're not their love, and I say this to young players all the time, their love for you, their care about you, their thoughts of you are not based on whether you get a double 100 against Glamorgan or you get a dark. Yeah. What point did you think that? Because to me, that is liberating. That is freeing when a lot of kids, young people, professionals, whoever they are, they put all this pressure on themselves because everything's so important. And when you think that, you know what, I'm actually the only person that really is affected by my results. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my parents they're really happy for me when I do well, but they don't love me anymore. At what point did you sort of come to realise that?
Yeah, I think there's always been like moments. I think like actually having a long-term partner in the last 3 or 4 years, well, we've been together 5 years, but probably as she sort of began to really invest herself in cricket for my sake, I think that was one thing. You know, she's just as supportive when it doesn't go well. She tries her best to help me all the time. So, you know, knowing that she's there is great. Like, I think just my parents and my grandparents, they come to every game. Like, they're always there. There's always at least one of them, if not 3, 4.
Even away games? Or...
Away games, my parents, like my dad's got his own business, so he's a plumber. Like, he gets a lot of work in the winter, works himself silly in the winter, saves up days, comes away and watches. They make a weekend of it. Like, they love to come and watch. My granddad is like my biggest fan ever. He'll be up at 4 a.m. to watch my game this Saturday in Perth. Like, he absolutely loves it.
Good
and knowing that they're always there, like, they obviously care because they know I care, but they'll always still be there. If I get 3 ducks in a row, they'll be at the 4th game. Like, I know that, and knowing that that's really nice. I think my brother as well, even though he's no longer playing the highest level of cricket, still gets just as involved, still has a really good knowledge of the game, always watches, always sending clips and saying, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. It's frustrating at times, but I know it's all coming from, he just wants me to get the absolute most out of myself and enjoy it like I always used to. And I think him having a son as well, I've now got a nephew. I've had games where, where was it? We had a T20 at Sussex this year. Didn't go very well. The last ball, they needed 1 to win. Came to me, missed the stumps, they win, lost the game. Feel like I've lost my team the game, spewing. Probably one of the moments this year where I wasn't able to maintain, hold my emotions in.
Which is really normal and
Yeah,
human nature.
whole bus ride home, spewing, don't speak to anyone. I'm babysitting the next day for Bertie. Wake up at 7, still spewing, I got a bit of an injury as well, so I'm annoyed about that. And then he rocks up at the door and don't think for the rest of the day about cricket. I'm just enjoying the company of a 18-month-old who's just running around. He doesn't care. He's throwing his ball at me and whatnot. I think that was a big eye-opener that, I'll hopefully one day have kids. And just having that was a real eye-opener that he doesn't even know how I'm feeling or what I've done last night, but he's just happy that
he's with his uncle.
Yeah, and I'm giving him blueberries to eat because he just loves that. So that was pretty cool as well. But just knowing that all those people are always there, even when it's not going very well, or I think it's the end of the world, they don't treat me any differently.
And it's amazing. A lot of the Aussie team have kids, and it gives you perspective. And people who with kids who are playing professional sport often say, I walk home and they don't know if I've got 100 or a duck, and they just give me a hug anyway. And it's the perspective shift that allows you to play with freedom. And kids are such an amazing way to take your mind off stress and things that we make important, because kids they want to have fun, they want to explore, they want to play. Let's talk about some mentors. You've spoken obviously we're a mentoring business, and you've spoken about your parents and your grandparents and your brother. Are there any other people in your life that have had a sort of a major impact, or people you go back to regularly?
Go back to regularly from an actual cricket hitting balls, catching balls point of view. No, but I have a lot of people that I am able to, drop a message, drop a voice note, and they'll always get back, and they'll always have stuff that resonates with me. Less so nowadays, but the first keeping coach I ever had was a guy called Keith Ford from my local cricket club. Coached my brother. He was that first team keeper at the time when I was growing up, and that was someone who was able to teach me a lot about how to play the game hard and the old school sort of cricket stuff. I think that sort of laid the foundations for a lot of the hard work that I like to do. When it comes to batting, I grew up, my college coach and my pathway coach is a guy called Tim Hancock. He used to play for Gloucester, a batter, and he didn't give me anything groundbreaking. It wasn't anything simple, but I think that was the first time I felt like someone else had a real understanding of my game as much as I did. And even now when I see him or message him, he was on our staff, up until quite recently. And he always goes back to the same messages he gave me when I was 16. And it's just, he's really key on alignment, and he's really key on, not gripping the bat too hard. That's his whole thing is, having a really relaxed hands and this sort of stuff. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing that's going to transform your game, but it's just because he knows that is a nice sort of point for me to go back to. And then Richard Dawson, who's the coach who gave me my Gloss debut, he's now England's, one of their white ball assistants and spin leads and this sort of stuff. I think he taught me a lot about leadership and about, how to be a good teammate and how to be, how to get into the system and stay there. I think he was, he created a team that was quite, almost people see as nuggety, sort of got it done on rubbish wickets and squeezed people in white ball cricket and this sort of stuff. And I think that sort of grit, determination to transform that into my batting and how I play the game now, that was a huge influence that he had probably, when I started playing professional cricket to when I got to Test cricket, he was probably the main one. So, there's also other keeping coaches who, when I was with England, transformed my keeping. It was like a crash course into wicket keeping over the space of 2 months, which was great with Bruce French and James Foster, like these guys. And again, Michael Bates, who was another one of those, constantly like on message talking about keeping. He's so keen to try and keep producing keepers who are keepers, like want to be a great keeper, not just stick the gloves on and do a job in a 50 over game. So yeah, there's a few there, but it's more like maintaining, contact every now and again when I need it. But it's not that sort of person that I just go to straight away. And then obviously being over here, like obviously doing some work with you as well. So I know that wherever I go, I've got people that are there to help me and want to do so, which is
And it sounds like your dad and your brother and a few of the people really close to you are good supports and someone you can bounce ideas off. And
exactly, like when it comes to cricket, my dad, he's a keen fourth team cricketer and he's a keen watcher, but he's so open about the fact that he lacks understanding about the real nuances about it. My brother does have that understanding, so I do feel comfortable chatting to my brother a lot. As I said, he's always sending clips through. He's like, look at this here, you got to do this, you got to do this, which I love. Like he's so invested, which is great. And if I ever want any positive feedback, I just go to my grandparents, because as grandparents are, I was having this conversation with Corey the other day, like they're just got their rose tinted glasses on all the time. I'm the best thing ever to them, and so Sam, and so are my other cousins. Like, so we can never do any wrong. So if I just need anyone to pump my tyres, I just go to Grandad and he'll send me a nice message.
Brilliant, amazing. Shout out to your grandparents again. We've covered so much already, but let's try and go a bit deeper into a few of the 6 pillars of success. So starting with your technique, we spent a fair bit of time working on stuff last year, and you had real specific things you were working on. But what are your technical fundamentals you're trying to sort of, no matter what the format, no matter you've got a bat in your hand, what are the things you're working on or towards? No matter where you're at in your game, if you're going well or not well, what are your fundamentals?
Yeah, I think I just look at, I think it's probably 3 things, balance. Everyone's got to be balanced on ball release. I think then as a left-hander, knowing the differences between facing from over and round and the alignment involved in that. I think that was what we worked on a lot last year, is I was constantly aligned really well to over the wicket, but then someone comes round, I keep the same alignment and it's suddenly way off. And just understanding how those both feel. And then the other one is just obviously like timing. So obviously being in a position where at ball release you're balanced, but then you're in a position where you can transfer your weight forward and back, and the timing of those movements. I think especially for someone with a trigger movement, I think if you have a trigger movement, you've just got to be really, I think they're great. I've always had one, but I'm very aware that it has to be in time. Like, it's not just for the sake of doing it. At ball release, if you froze it, I want to be in the same position as if I wasn't doing a trigger movement, and I'm sort of where I would be at anyway. Quite confusing, but like, hands under my head, hands still and ready to load back rather than not being on the way down still. So yeah, timing, alignment and balance. I think if all those 3 are in whack, then there's not too many changes that need to be made between red, white, T20, 50 over. I was actually talking to Corey. I've learned a lot in the last 2 weeks from Corey chatting to people. But he was chatting about Josh Inglis and how he's started so well in the Shield this year, but actually his sort of he's realised that actually changing his technique and his mindset through coming back from a white ball tour straight into Shield cricket has hardly changed, and it's more about, it's all in a place where he can still lob someone over mid wicket or extra cover or pull and cut, but it doesn't matter what colour the ball is. All those fundamentals are in place, and that's the main thing.
Awesome. And how deep now with where you're at? Obviously your game's gone really well. apart from the last couple of games here, got out early, but last season in Australia, dominated. Your county season was excellent. How deep are you going into your technique now compared to maybe when you weren't going so well?
Less so. I think because I'm not constantly searching for stuff that I actually realised after a long while wasn't even there. I was obsessed with the fact that I keep getting out, there's something wrong technically. Not knowing what it was, or not seeing that it was something that actually, if I'd have looked at some clips from 2018, if I'd have looked at some clips from the start of 2021, I'd have seen straight away that it was just a case of my alignment was slightly out, my trigger was slightly late and rushed, and it was all stuff that I'd done before. It wasn't, I came over here and had my first session with you last year, and I was expecting you to say something that I'd never ever thought about, and expected you to say that something completely new, and it was just a case of you're not side on, you're not aligned to the bowler, just work on doing that. And it was so simple, and it's quite frustrating knowing that I've probably not wasted, but it's taken me 2 years to realise that, rather than actually just asking for some help and not just going down rabbit holes of searching for something. Now I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable in, if something doesn't quite look or feel right, or someone says something, I just think about, well, just, you know where you start, you know what guard you want to take, you know how you want to be aligned with your feet and your hips, and you know how you want it to look. So just get a camera out, have a few throwdowns, and just get back into that rhythm. It's as simple as that. Like, it's not any more than that. And then it means that when I'm going out in a game, I'm not thinking about where my head is, I'm not thinking about where my feet are lined up to, because it feels a lot more natural.
And I heard on the India-New Zealand test a couple of days ago, they were talking about Rachin Ravindra, and he'd obviously batted amazingly in the first innings, got 100, and he came out to bat in the second innings, and Bumrah had Devon Conway hopping around and looking like awful, and just looked like he was going to get out every ball. And Rachin walked out, and first ball, second ball, he clipped through mid-wicket, then he ran it down to backward point, they were saying he looks like he's batting on a different wicket. How much, and they were saying, I think it was Dinesh Karthik and Ian Smith were talking about, it all starts in the mind. It's all starting in the mind, so that he's moving more positively, he's decisive in his decision making, he's getting in better positions. How much of your success this year, I guess, was due to that? And a second question on top of that is, how important was your runs over here in Perth, where you did really well and you spent a lot of time in the middle, albeit it wasn't professional cricket, but it was still a high standard of cricket. How important was that you then took that sort of understanding of your game, that belief in yourself, that trust in your game, that confidence into your county season? And in the past, the thing that a lot of people do is they look at the vision, and it's like, oh, I didn't move my feet. Oh, that's a technical thing. Yeah. But it all, as they were saying, it all starts in the mind. You move your feet when you're making good decisions, when you're positive, etc. Yeah,
I think, well, if someone, watching Ravindra, it just looked like it's totally instinctive. It's totally, there's no sort of doubts. There's no, there's just such clarity in what he's going to do. And it almost means that he's getting good balls and still scoring off them, because he's moving so positively. He's not missing out on any bad balls, so that then he doesn't feel like he has to force anything. It just looks totally like natural. And I think going out in the second innings, when you've got 140 and you've got the pace of the bowlers already, and you've got the pace of the wicket already, it just makes things obviously so much easier. I think when you're playing on instinct, there's so many times when you play a shot and you go, how have I done that? Like, not that you've done anything out of this world. It might just be that a ball that's not particularly full, you've managed to just lean on and it's gone away for four. And again, that just comes with, like you said, this time last summer in Australia, I faced so many balls. I made sure that I was going to go out and bat for a long time. And you sort of learn those little idiosyncrasies of when you get to a certain stage in your innings, you're able to then add shots and take shots away. And that becomes natural. You don't think, oh, I've got to 30, I need to make sure now that I get to 50 and knuckle down and just knock my way there. You just have these instincts that, oh, if the ball ends up there, it's going to go. You don't think, oh, this off spin has come on. I've been working on my sweep lately. I'm going to make sure I sweep. I love sweeping the ball, but sometimes I never play one for weeks on end because it just doesn't, it's not instinctive. I think that's the main thing about when you get into a rhythm of putting scores together and stuff. You don't think about, oh, my on drive isn't working very well at the moment. You just sort of, it happens when you get there because you're totally clear about where your technique's at and where your game's at and where your head's at. I know that when I'm in one of those periods where I'm not thinking too much and I'm playing shots where I'm like, didn't know I had that. It's just because your body's taken over and all the work you've done is doing the work for you, essentially.
And I think the thing there is the word trust. You're trusting yourself and your subconscious, as opposed to when things aren't going well, we start looking for answers, we start trying things, and consciously we get very active. We're like, what if I try this? What if I try that? What if I do this? I'm going to try that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to control this. And then we just get really cluttered, and we get like we're not actually going back to the simplest form of batting, which is see the ball, make a decision, move and hit the ball. And I'm all for tinkering. I'm all for problem solving. But I think when players are at their absolute best, they're doing a bit of problem solving and tinkering during the week or whatever. But when they walk out to bat, they're fully trusting all the work they've done up until that point.
I think, and that's what I'd say to young players, is that stuff all still happens with professionals as well. I think I've always been quite lucky. I've always had the same trigger movement. I've always had the same sort of movement patterns, and it's been a case of just trying to groove those. That's always what's felt comfortable. So many players still, they're triggering, they're not triggering. Their hands are going here, their hands are doing this, they're not doing this. And I just lose track. So I think that should hopefully give young players some confidence that it's natural. Professional players, high grade players, it happens to everyone. Everyone's always thinking about that sort of stuff somewhere. So if you do have those feelings, that's fine. Just understand that the sooner that you can realise that, try and make it what's best for you, the better, because I honestly think in 99% of circumstances, what comes naturally is the way to go. It's just a case of those little small details of timing and balance and stuff just needs grooving and perfecting.
Yeah, and you look at Travis Head, who I've mentioned, like Steve Smith, they're guys who are batting unorthodox, but they're doing it their way, and they're fully committing to their way, their plan, their method. And when you fully commit to what you want to do, as opposed to do something a bit half-hearted, that's when you give yourself the best chance.
Yeah. And it's also fine to change. Like if something really feels like it's not feeling as it should, absolutely, but just understand that it will take some time, and there are times and places for those sorts of things.
Going back to your technical fundamentals, tell us about your keeping. What do you focus on with your keeping?
Keeping's just all about posture, I think, and body position. It's so interesting coming back and forth between England and Australia because, we do it so differently. Naturally, English keepers are slightly more upright, slightly taller, slightly less lateral movement, because, we tend to stand closer with lower wickets and sort of maybe a little bit more lateral movement than Australian keepers who get more carry, and probably the danger for keepers is the excessive bounce. So there's always going to be differences, but I think having good posture so that you can move quickly sideways, you can move quickly jumping up and down, is key. And then obviously up to the stumps, having a strong base to work from. The stronger your base, the less movement you have to make. There's a really good guy on Instagram, the wicket-keeping coach, Josh. He, I totally agree with him when he says up to the stumps, there's only two movements you need. You need a step to the offside and you need a shuffle down the leg side. If you're doing any more than that, I'd go back to the foundation and say, where are you starting? And is that a powerful position to move from? If you're in a powerful position, everything else is so much simpler.
Yeah, nice. Now, how does your training look juggling both? Because you want to be a great wicket keeper as well as a great batsman. Batters get to hit balls, maybe catch a few and go home. How are you juggling being the best you can be at both?
Yeah, I think I approach them slightly differently. Batting's more little and often. When I say little, it's not like 6 or 10 balls. Like, half an hour. If we're going on a training day, it might be, 10 minutes of throws and basic stuff. 20 minutes against a slinger or bowlers. Depending on the day, it might be 2 blocks of half hour here and there. But I don't like to, unless it's against bowlers or against slingers and not too close to the start of the game. I don't like to go in and do 2 hours at a time. I just think that's when I think I have a tendency to go searching and search for something that I don't necessarily need. If I'm hitting the ball, if I'm moving well, if things feel good, I've actually learnt that that's as effective for me. Keeping, I like to do big blocks. Especially in the season, I like to obviously do my prep. I have my routine day of a game, day before a game where, I do a lot of one-handed work. I do a lot of catching out a machine or getting people to throw spin and real simple stuff using boards. But in between that, I like to have, maybe a day every 2 or 3 weeks where a keeping coach comes in and I'll do a real block of 2 or 3 hours. Just because I think keeping is a long slog. Like, you've got to get used to, and I know there's the same thing with batting, but I think with batting, I think a lot more technically when things aren't going well. When things aren't going well with keeping, I'm getting better at just parking it and you catch the next one. Whereas batting, I think slightly differently about. I think if I do too much, I go searching and it gets cluttered. So keeping, I like to do a big block. It satisfies my little, physical. I come out and I'm blowing and I love that. But I also just get to catch millions of balls, have a bit of fun, jump around, and I like to have a big session. So yeah, I do them slightly differently, and it often involves coming in a little bit earlier, staying a little bit later, but I like to tick the boxes to know that if I'm going into a game, I'm fully prepared.
And that's the price you got to pay if you want to be great. You got to do the extra yards there.
Exactly.
Now, moving into the tactical pillar, I want to give you a little scenario that young players will hopefully relate to because we all go through it. You batted at 5 for Gloucester this year, which means when you go into bat, it's out of your control. You could go in at 5 runs for 3 wickets, or you could go in at 350 for 3.
Yeah.
How do you adjust your game plan and mindset based on what the scoreboard is saying?
Yeah, I feel like this is where I'm quite fortunate that I have had that experience of batting up the top as well. So if I am in at 3 for nothing, it's about maybe soaking up that period of pressure, knowing that the bowlers are probably bowling well, it is moving a little bit, they're confident, and just trying to absorb that a little bit. There are certain players that would go out in that situation and be like, right, in order for them to not be on top anymore, I want to pile it back on them. I'm never going to be one of those people. I back my, not that they don't back their technique, but I'd say I back my technique, I back my processes that I can get through this 5 or 10 over spell of pressure. I would always be in that camp. If I'm coming in at 350 for 3, I think it's always important to give yourself that time anyway. Don't feel like, and I feel like in white ball cricket especially, a lot of people, I still have this, like, you go in and you think there's not a lot of time. You think, oh, it's a white ball, I've got to whack it. There's always so much more time than you think, even in T20 cricket. Give yourself, it might be 5 balls, it might be 25 balls, just to get the pace of the pitch, just get a hold of the situation. And then you can always think clearer once you've got a hold of that. So if I'm in at 350 for 3, I'm still giving myself, it might not be that I'm just batting and batting. I might get to 20 balls and think, right, we might be trying to set 500 and have enough time to bowl a team out. There might be a guy at the other end who's on 150 not out. It might just be a case of get myself off strike. He's hitting them beautifully. Let him do that. Or if I feel like I can get on top of a bowler still in quite a low risk manner. I'm probably just looking to do that earlier than I would otherwise. So, you know, if a spinner's on, I might look to use my feet and be a bit more aggressive against them than I would be at 4 for 40, where I'm probably looking to score off the back foot and then maybe look to rotate and soak up pressure off the front or something like that. But I think the key I would always say in all situations is you have way more time than you think. You know, I often have that in T20 cricket where I rush things. I feel like I need to take a risk. You don't. I think, again, I've learned that a lot this year playing in the Blast and actually winning the Blast and knowing that we had 2 opening batters who really took their time. They said, look, we're going to take 2 or 3 overs to get the pace of the wicket, set a foundation, because we know that that losing wickets is the worst thing in any cricket match. Like, that's the thing that's going to put you behind the game. So always giving yourself that time to get used to a new wicket, a new surroundings, new opposition, all those things, so that then when you are in, you've got everything in check and you can just allow yourself to play.
So is it the same if you walk out and the wicket is different? So we spoke about the scoreboard being different, but let's say you walk out and then one day the wicket's really flat and the next it's seaming around. How are you adapting to those conditions?
Yeah, so I probably naturally, on a pitch that's a bit flatter, I'm probably playing up more balls because I feel like I can score off more balls. You've got to try and think, and I'm often, you know, not so good at this. You've always got to think about scoring runs because that's what you're there to do. I think on a seaming wicket, you know, I've probably got in my head a little bit more that I need to leave the ball a bit more. I need to maybe use my feet to try and put them off their length. Whereas on a flat wicket, you can probably play at more balls, and as long as you're in a good position, a ball that you might leave that you feel like is going to leave you, you know, off the surface, I feel like I can play at and maybe hit through the covers or run down to third man. But it's about quickly adapting once you get to the wicket, because there are times where the batters above you can make it look flat, but it's actually not so flat. So you can't just go out there with any preconceptions. You've got to have the same process going into an innings of see how it plays, get the pace. Okay, right, it is flat. Like they're bowling pretty well, but it is flat. I can put them out of their rhythm in a more low risk manner than, you know, if it's nipping around and I've got to really wait for an opportunity to score. I think it's a case of you can tell some things from watching, but once you get out there, always do your own assessment before you then try anything.
Yeah, nice. And now you just spoke about winning the Blast, obviously a huge moment for Gloucestershire, and I know it was, you're a huge part of that success. You got 49 not out in the semi-final, but you played a championship game that finished on the 12th of September, and the finals day was on the 14th. So there's one day in between which you probably had to travel.
Yep.
How do you juggle the sort of ability to play all formats and go from 4-day cricket to T20 cricket? What's changing in your technique, your mindset, or your game plans?
Yeah, I still find it so tricky, and I think England's probably the place where it's the worst for it. We had the quarterfinal Friday, started 4-day on the Monday, finished Thursday, played again Saturday. So it was just juggling between the two. Just got to be really, really clear on what you feel you 100% need to get out of something. Like, if you think that I can rock up at Edgbaston on Friday before finals day, have a 20-minute hit, you know, go through my processes that get me right back in the T20 mindset, great. Some people, I'm probably one of these. So during that red ball game, I made sure I found time to hit some white balls, and it didn't affect my ability to play in the red ball game. You know, I nicked off actually for 0 in the first innings, but I got 60 in the second innings, which helped us chase down a score. I didn't feel any less confident or in rhythm in my red ball because I was practicing some white ball. But, you know, I got in at 8 o'clock and I was like, I want to hit half hour of white balls before I then focus purely on the day's play, which is obviously red. Again, it's just making those little sacrifices to make sure that you can squeeze it all in. Keeping less so because it's up, back, catching a ball, maybe take a few high balls, but you often wait until you're under lights and stuff for stuff like that anyway. But I think it's all about sacrifice. I think if you feel like you need to put the time in, making the time to do it, because I hate the feeling of not being prepared. And I look back on this season, there have been points where you finish a game on the Friday, start a different format on the Sunday, and I felt unprepared. So I think just playing county cricket for 7 or 8 years has just shown me that it's just about giving up 20, 30 minutes here and there just to hone the skills I think are important.
Yeah, nice. Now, your mindset, you just said how you got nicked off for a duck, I think it was against Middlesex, and then you got 60 in the second innings to help win the game. How do you let go of a low score, or other games where you get 2 low scores in the match? How do you let go and move on and not let that baggage carry forward?
It's hard. I think in the moment it's all about not letting your emotions, dictate how you view that. So, for example, I'm in the past been terrible for coming off, shouting, screaming, almost like trying to prove that I care to people in my team. And they always say, just don't need to. We know what you're like. We know who you are. We know that you care more than anyone about the results that we get. And I think the key for me has just been making sure that my reflection is based on, not based on emotion, basically. So, I come off now after I've got out and I read just whatever book I've been reading for the last couple of weeks. It might be anything. It's not necessarily anything to do with psychology or cricket or anything. It might just be a novel that I've been reading. But I just read that 5-10 minutes.
So do you still have your pads on and you open your book straight away?
I laughed this week because I usually just take my helmet off, arm guard off, gloves off, and just leave my pads on. But this week I literally took my gloves off, I had my helmet on, I had my arm guard on, and I'm just reading my book. And I just think...
So do you have it next to your bag ready to go?
I just have it under my seat. And I just think if you're reading a book and you're paying attention to the words on that page, you aren't paying attention to what's just happened. And I just feel like that helps me with just allowing that emotion, that frustration to just drain. And then, okay, then while I'm taking my kit off, I can then reflect actually based on either it was a good bit of bowling, it was a poor umpiring decision, or it was a bad decision. And I reckon 99.9% of dismissals you can put into those 3 categories. And once I figure out which one it was, if it's a decision-making thing, I say, well, what could I have done? What should I have done? And it's as simple as that. Bang, gone. And
so are you able to then walk out and enjoy the rest of the day despite your own personal failure or sort of not achieving what you'd like to of that day?
A lot more than I used to. There's definitely still days, 100%, where it's sort of I carry it a little bit. And that's definitely something I'm still working on, but a lot more than previously. I'd say, 95% of the time now, I can then walk out and be like, I've got a keep now, or I've got a captain now, or I've got a field now. How am I going to impact the game and help us win the game by doing that? Rather than thinking, I've not got any runs, I've been useless today, basically. And I'm hoping that in time that will become 99%, 100%. But that definitely helps.
And you watch the best players. They punch their bat or something when they get out, and there's that moment of frustration, and 20 minutes later or however long later, you see the camera pans to the dressing room. They're often just in their casuals, laughing, playing cards, joking, because that's their ability to accept that they made a mistake and move on, park it and move on, and not hold on to that, which I did when I was young and so many people 100%. Do, is just beat ourselves up when in actual fact we're wasting energy. There's no point. Yeah,
no, definitely. And I just hope that I can continue to improve that, because I know people still say to me in our dressing room, I'll have a moment and they'll be like, mate, why do you do it? And I just look at them, I'm like, I know, I don't know why, but sometimes it just boils over.
Comes out,
yeah, I found having that little sort of reading thing has helped me just to analyse a bit more rationally and therefore allow those things not to stick around.
Right, we're running out of time, so I want to still get through a few more things. But
Yeah.
last season here in Perth, you dominated. I don't know your exact numbers, but your season in your county season in England, you did well in all formats, but 1,089 runs at an average of 60.5, 4 centuries, including 2 double hundreds that were unbeaten, 204 not out, 207 not out. What do you think is, and we might have already touched on this, but what do you think, this is probably a period where you've batted at your best, this plus a few others, but what do you think is the gap between batting at your absolute best and when you've been out of runs, out of form, low on confidence? What is that gap, do you think, for you?
No fear of getting out. Like, and you're not focused on, oh, I've been getting out like this, or I don't want to get out like this. Like, almost being comfortable with a way of getting out, and that's fine. If you do get out in another way, it happens. Like, I definitely nick them more than I get hit on the pad, for example, but I've not been one who gets out in one way. Like, there will be times where, I get clean bowled because I'm trying to, drive one which isn't quite there to drive, or something like that. I think just not going out there with any fear of getting out. You are going to get out most innings, whether it's on 100, 150, 0, whatever. You are going to get out, and not thinking about when that might be. I think that's the key. Like, in those periods where I wasn't scoring the runs, I was going out like, I've been getting out to this and this quite a lot. Like, if I don't play it perfectly like this, I'm going to do this, and it's just a whole lot of clutter that's not required. And I think just being aware that you are going to get out, it's fine, it happens, and just not thinking about the dismissal, but thinking about, right, I'm going to go and score runs, basically. It's focusing on the runs, not the dismissal.
And that leads into our next question around your mindset. Do you process your routines pre-game and in between balls when you're batting or keeping? Can you give us a bit of an insight into what are you doing the night before, what are you doing the morning of, and then when you walk out to bat and you're in between balls, how are you managing your mind and your thoughts?
Yeah, so batting-wise, the night before, we always get a document through about analysis of the opposition. I don't like going into the day of a game thinking about the opposition. I like to think about what we're doing as a team and what I'm doing. So I'll go through their bowlers, how are they going to try and get me out? Where do I see myself putting pressure back on them? And that's usually 15, 20 minutes done, right? It's nicer these days where I've played against the majority of guys, so I've got previous experience, so that doesn't need to be too much. Morning of a game, always catch a few balls, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just, underarms, one-handers, few dives, maybe catch bowlers if they're bowling. Batting, I always like to have a hit on turf before a game. I just think, I understand that the net wickets aren't always the same as the match wickets, but just getting the feel of, I think, hitting the ball on grass is so different to hitting the ball indoors or on AstroTurf. So,
and if you're at a grade ground where there's no turf, how do you manage that?
I don't hit before a game.
Right. So if the turf isn't available, you won't hit?
I won't hit. Okay. I just, as much as there is a time and a place for underarms, there's a time and a place for hitting throws. Maybe in white ball where I want to, hit some strikes or use my feet and hit some bombs or something like that, I may use them, just depending on how I feel. But before a red ball game, if there's no turf available, or, to have some bowlers or a stick or something, I just think I'm not going to gain enough out of that to compromise it, taking away from, an extra quarter of an hour getting my body ready or catching some balls or discussing tactics with teammates and stuff like that. I just don't feel, I feel like I can go out without it.
And that's deep trust, I guess. And I think so many young players think that their net before they bat is so important. If they hit them well, they're going to bat well. And if they don't hit them well, and in fact, a lot of players are like you and go, I don't need to bat. I'm just going to walk out and trust what I've done.
Yeah. And especially here, I think, because obviously there isn't turf nets available for a game, I hit 4 times a week. Like at uni, we're very lucky we get the turf nets 3 nights in a morning a week. So on a Friday morning, I'll do all the prep I need to do, so that on the Saturday I can just rock up, make sure my body's good and get cracking.
And then in between balls?
In between balls, so I've got very specific numbers of things I do. So I've got my 2 guards, or three guards. So, I'll be, say, spin turning in from round the wicket, from over the wicket, it'll be off stump. Seam from round the wicket tends to be middle stump. Seam from over the wicket tends to be leg stump. And that only changes if, say, it's maybe reverse swinging or tailing, or their plan is so obvious that they're trying to hit me on the pad. I might slide to leg stump, something like that. But usually it's that. Whatever guard I'm on for that ball, I'll scratch it. I'll scratch it twice with my inside spike, twice with my outside spike. This is not stuff that I've put in place specifically. It's just over time. That's just how it works. Always tap my bat 6 times. Always peel away after a ball off the strip, sort of get out of the battle as such, and treat that as that is a place where I'm 100% switched on, and I'm in a battle with the bowler in between balls. Just sort of save some mental energy, get out of there, walk off the strip. Don't know what I do then. It's sort of 30 seconds of just, I don't know, humming to myself, singing to myself, looking out where are my parents in the ground, look at the clock, what time is it, bang, right, bowler's at the top of their mark, back in again and do the same thing. And it's more of a case of just switch on, switch off, rather than being too cooped up with being switched on the whole time, which is so hard for 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, that I think in that moment where I am at the crease, I've got enough understanding of, where the field is, what the bowler's trying to do. I'm able to then switch off, and then when I get back in, right, bang, all that information's still there. I still feel good. Bang, shape up, off we go.
Yeah, lovely. Now, I've got a heap more questions, but we're out of time. So I just want to ask last couple of things. If you were able to speak to your 15-year-old self, what advice would you give you?
All of that stuff around frustration, sort of managing your emotions, it's so hard when you're 15. One, you don't know. Two, it's seen as weak to go and try and help yourself a little bit. But just, it is not the end of the world. Things can happen, even if things aren't happening for you at 15. There's so much time, and you don't know how the circumstances are going to play out. So just keep enjoying. I think that is just so key, because it's no fluke that probably the 18 months, 2 years of my career where I've not enjoyed cricket as much as I usually do have been the two where I've struggled the most performance-wise. That is not a fluke. That's proven that if you're enjoying something, you're going to be better at it. I think that's the key. And if you aren't enjoying it, then just understanding if that's not a problem either. You got to do stuff in life that makes you happy. And yeah, obviously if that is cricket, great. And if it's not, it's not. I don't think if I had been like that when I was younger, I feel like I'd have maybe forced myself, because I'd have felt other people would have wanted me to do that. Having those people around you who care about you, they're not I guarantee you that most of the time, if you aren't enjoying something, they will help you do whatever you can to enjoy it. So just appreciate those people as well. That's so key.
Awesome. And Nick, finally, what's next for you? What's next in the short term? What's next in the long term? And where do you think you'll be once you finish cricket? What do you hope to do after cricket?
Yeah, so I've obviously got goals for this off-season again. I came last year with goals and I managed to meet them. So I've got some different ones this year, as well as, doing more of the same good stuff that I've done over the last 12 months. There's a Lions tour here after Christmas. I'd love to think that maybe there's a chance of being involved in that. But, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It might happen now. It might happen in 5 years' time. It might not happen. But I'm very much at peace with where I'm at with Gloucester, where I'm at with uni at the moment, where I'm loving cricket again. And that's the main thing. I'd love to play for England again. But as you said, can't take away the cap that I've already got. So that's amazing for what it is. In the long term, yeah, I've got, high aspirations with Gloucester, getting back into Division 1, going back to back with the Blast. I'd love to, captain them one day and put my own stamp on what we're doing and sort of provide the younger players that we've got with the leadership that I was lucky to have when I was growing up. That's definitely on my bucket list of things to do. And after cricket, I've studied, I've done an undergrad, I've done a master's in psychology, so that's something I'm interested in, but I've still got lots of time, I'd like to think, to see where that goes. I'm always curious to, get on LinkedIn, make new contacts, network, and I'm very much in that place at the moment where I might meet someone or see something at some point which sparks something. So I'm not putting my eggs in too many in one basket. I'd like to think that there's quite a few options, which is good.
Amazing. Well, Brace, like your teammate, housemate Rock, this has been a fascinating and quite a long conversation. So thank you for all your amazing insights.
Thanks,
we could have kept chatting for another few hours, I'm sure, but really appreciate your time, your generosity, your vulnerability with everything, and no doubt if it's just one kid or one parent or someone, I'm sure there's going to be more than that takes something from this. Well, then it's been worthwhile. So thank you. I look forward to getting back in the nets with you and watching you evolve, watching your continued success over the next 12 months, but hopefully a lot more beyond that as well. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Been good.
If you enjoyed this episode or any of our content, then please do me a big favour and subscribe to our channel. The more subscribers we get, the bigger the guests we can get on and continue to help you on your journey of becoming the best you can be.